I am so excited to be talking to my favorite person from Love After Lockup, Life After Lockup. I guess you were on 2 seasons, right?
Yes.
Brittany Santiago, and I've covered the show from the start, on Juicy Scoop, and I talked about you final episode because it was so
Oh, really?
beautiful what you said to your husband about
Mhm.
going forward and just, breaking the pattern
Yeah.
of the way you guys were parented and now your parents. And so then I was so excited to see that you have written a book about your life that is
Yes.
available now on Amazon. And because your life, is really amazing. We saw more of it this season.
Yeah.
And I'll just let you kind of a little bit explain, your story for those that you don't, my audience do not need to have watched the show because your story is just very interesting on its own.
Yeah.
So,
So, um, unfortunately, I am somebody who had a rough childhood, and both my parents suffered from alcoholism, and my grandparents' alcoholism and drugs, and it's just a cycle that keeps on going. And by the time I was 12, I ran away from home, and I struggled on the streets all the way until I was incarcerated at 18. And I endured sexual abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, drug abuse. You name it. I've been there and I've been through it. But just being on the show, everyone knows like I've been to prison. Like if there's one thing somebody can say they know about me, it's that I've been to prison. And I do get a lot of ridicule about that. And so it kind of motivated me to want to write my book and tell my story, because I didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I think I want to go to prison. Like that never happened. It just, no one ever puts like the thought process, like what led up in this person's life that caused them to, just make the decisions that led them to be arrested and be sentenced to prison. And so I just pretty much wrote my story, and it's actually I'm writing a trilogy. So it's the first of three. And that book pretty much covers my childhood all the way up to my first incarceration.
oh, that's great. So,
Yeah.
now we saw that, you ran away at 12. Now, how does
Yeah.
that work when a child like runs away? So you because of the turmoil in your home, what caused you to like leave and just think that you could survive on your
Well,
own at 12?
there was never, being 12, you're so, immature mentally, I would say, and emotionally. And you don't really think logically. You think everything is about a feeling and how you feel when you're a child. And I really felt like if I left, like nobody would notice I was gone. I had already felt abandoned being in the home with the people that were supposed to love me and take care of me. And so I had actually ran away with my older sister, and I've never really talked about her on the show, um, just because she's not really a part of my life anymore, unfortunately. And I actually did, she talked me into running away with her, and I just got held up on this idea that it was such a good idea. I was going to go out into the world and, just find somebody who loved me and just find just something better in life. And she ended up like leaving me that night that we ran away, and I was just devastated and by myself. And I don't it was crazy because we had just moved to Las Vegas from Alaska, and we had been there for like maybe less than a week, and I didn't really know my way back, and I just kind of stuck. It's hard to explain.
So, I mean, but where did you like sleep those nights and
I
stuff?
was homeless for a really long time. If I know, like the first person I had met was this girl named Danielle, and she was the first person to introduce me to drugs. And I ended up breaking down and telling her like I'm scared. I ran away. I shouldn't have ran away. My sister just left me. I'm alone. Can you help me? And she was like, "Well, where do you live?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." I remember I came from that way, but I'm following my older sister's lead, and I wasn't really paying attention. Like I'm just 12 years old in the middle of the night, walking down the street, taking this turn, that turn, and I'm so new to Las Vegas. I had never. It was like we had been here for like a week up into that point, and so I stayed with Danielle for a while, and then sometimes through sometime throughout those 6 years that I was a runaway teenager, I was homeless and I did sleep outside if I wasn't staying with somebody who was willing to take me in.
And so, what does your mom say about that now? Like when you and your sister disappeared, did she call the authorities? Did she put up posters? I mean, what was she doing to try to find you?
She called the police and reported us missing, but then that was it. And when I was finally able to describe the last place that that we had stayed in, because we had just moved from Anchorage to Las Vegas, and my parents had got a weekly because my stepdad was out here before we were, and instead of getting the house ready like he was supposed to, he was gambling and drinking and had no money. So when we just showed up at the airport, he kind of panicked and ended up pawning some stuff or money for a weekly. So when I was able to
You mean
remember
like a
what that week,
a hotel that you can stay at for 1
yeah,
week
that you
for
get paid by the week,
okay.
yeah. And so when I was able to remember what it looked like and describe it to Danielle, she actually she knew the place I was talking about and took me there. And when we had knocked on the door, like some old white dude had answered the door and my family was gone. And I think it was because like when that week was up, they couldn't pay anymore. And so it's like, I mean, so my mom and my little sisters, they just left with my dad. And I didn't see them again until, gosh, 14, 15.
I just I,
Yeah.
it's just unbelievable to me. I'm
Yeah.
not saying I don't believe you. I'm just saying I can't believe that.
It's it's sad because throughout those whole 6 years that I was a runaway teenager, I couldn't have made it on my own. And so if you think about it, well, who was helping me? It was adults. And I never lied to anybody. I always told my truth. Hey, I'm a runaway. Hey, I'm only 12. Hey, I'm only 13, whatever it was. Or, hey, I'm hungry. Can you please help me? And time and time again, like if I was panhandling for food or something, people would just give me money and then walk away. And they wouldn't even ask, like, are you okay? What's your situation? Do you need help? Do you need to be taken somewhere? And then on the other side of that, when after I had started using drugs, it was grown adults that were supplying my drug habit and buying me drugs or having me sell dope for them. And it's unfathomable to me now that I am an adult and I have children.
And in this time, I remember you said on the show that when you were 12, you had a 30-year-old boyfriend.
Yeah, and you know what? I talk about him a lot in the book that I just wrote because he's a major, major, major part of my life. I met him when I was about to turn 13, or I did turn 13, I can't remember. And he was almost 30 years old, and I had nowhere to go, and I was wandering around on the streets, and he was like, hey, well, you can come stay with me. And he was actually working as a security guard at one of the hotels downtown here, and he was also a dope dealer. So when I started staying with him, it wasn't, he never really like hit on me like other people did when I had stayed with them. And it wasn't until like, I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a month into staying with him, that our relationship went from roommate to an actual relationship, and he pursued me and definitely took advantage of me. And this sexual abuse with this man went on for so many years. I ended up having 2 kids with him at 15 and at 16. And it was horrific. Sometimes it's hard to talk about these things.
I can imagine because we saw that you revealed that on the show, that you had given up 2 children up for adoption. And when you found yourself pregnant living with this guy, I mean, did you get a prenatal care? Like, what was going on? You were so young.
Honestly, no. And I didn't even know what prenatal care was. I didn't know what you were supposed to do when you were pregnant. Not that he was very helpful either. And he didn't really ever let me leave. And I remember one time, like when he was gone at work, I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't feel good. I'm hungry. I'm pregnant. I'm tired. I'm just all of these things. And I ended up opening the door to try to go out, and he was right there watching, and he was like, get back inside, and da da da. And ever since then, like I was so scared to try to get away from him. And it wasn't
Did you even
until
realize that you had become like a kidnapped victim, that you were like that you couldn't.
I had no idea.
Wow.
And I didn't have any idea until I was at least 24, 25 years old. Throughout like when I was arrested at 18, throughout my 5-year incarceration, I still battled because now, when I was arrested at 18, it was my chance to get sober because I was incarcerated, which is one reason why I wasn't even really mad that I was arrested. I was actually glad. And I remember when I was arrested, the officer was like, "What are you smiling about? Like, you're going to jail." And I'm like, "You have no idea. Like, this is such a relief. I'm so happy because I never really wanted to be on drugs and I didn't know how not to use drugs once I started. Um,
What was
and
your drug?
methamphetamines.
And
Yeah,
were
I got
you were you
that when I was 12 years old.
so were you doing the meth while you were pregnant?
No, I was able. So Jeremy actually lost his job, like right before I want to say right before I became pregnant, and we ended up sleeping in a park. We were homeless for a really long time. And one day he had told me, he was like, "You need to take this pregnancy test." He had stole it from a store or something. And he's like, "You need to take this." And I was like, "You think I'm pregnant?" And it was like just so outrageous to me. But I took the test and it was positive. And at that time, like we didn't have money for drugs. I was just sleeping in the park. I had slept off the dope by then. And every day was just a struggle to try to get something to eat. And it was 8 months out of that pregnancy, I slept in the park. And finally, him and I had got into an argument so bad because I had hustled up a bunch of money and I was going to use it the next day to try to get a hotel room to get off the streets and take a shower and get something to eat. And he had ended up hitting me and taking the money from me to go buy dope. And so I got on the bus and I had called my step grandmother Beverly and got my parents' contact information from her, and I was able to get a hold of my mother, and I ended up going to her house. And the next day, I went into labor and I gave birth to my son. And yeah,
And so you're in the hospital, you give birth to your son, and what? Then your mom and everybody walks in and it's like, you should just give this baby up? Or how did it come about?
no, like no, I kept my son. I stayed with my parents. I was doing good. I stayed sober. However, my father was, he is my stepfather, but he's like the only dad I've ever known. So I don't want to confuse the audience or anybody. Like when I say my dad or my father, my stepdad is who I am talking about. But he was out gambling and not paying the bills. And, I had a newborn baby in a house with no electricity and no hot water and 3 younger sisters as well. And we're, can't cook, can't do nothing. So we're eating like sandwiches every day. And I ended up getting a hold of Jeremy. And he told me that he had got a job since I had left him and he had money. And I told my mom, I said, "Okay, listen, let's just go over there, get some money from him because he owes me some money. I just had a baby by him. Let's go over there, get some money from him." And that's what we did. I got some money from him and that's how I got back in contact with him. But, and ended up going on a wrong path with him again.
And so what happened? So then when did you give up the baby?
Well, I didn't give up the baby. I don't want to give away too many.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well,
Well, we want people to see the book. Okay.
Yeah. But because it's in there, because nobody really knows the story about what happened with my children, and I didn't just give them up. It wasn't like that. I was struggling back and forth with Jeremy on the streets, and we'll save that juicy part for the book.
And if using that term, giving up your baby, obviously,
Yeah.
I'm not judging anything because obviously you did whatever everyone should read the book, but obviously you were doing the best by your child. And so I think that expression, if there's a better way for people to say it, I wish I could say it because I don't want to be like, that. Okay. So so you got arrested at 18 because they caught you doing drugs or selling drugs or what?
No, I had ended up in California hanging out with a bunch of drug addicts, and I ended up going to a place where the people I was with robbed somebody there, and I got scared and I fled the scene. And obviously, I didn't have a vehicle or anything to leave with, and so I took a vehicle from the person that was robbed and I left. I was terrified. I got in the car and I just left and I came back to Vegas. And so I was arrested and charged with everything having to do with the robbery as if I had robbed that person. I mean, in all fairness, I did steal his truck. I was there. I did flee the scene. So I got charged with everything having to do with that case, and I ended up doing 3 years in California for that. And I thought I was getting ready to parole, but I got extradited to Las Vegas on new charges because I drove that truck from California to Nevada over state lines. I had caught vehicle theft charges in Nevada, so I had to serve another 2 years there. So it was 5 years total.
Wow. And then, so you're in prison in Las Vegas, and that's where the story
Well,
we know.
the first 3 years, I was in California prison, and let
Which
me just
prison?
say, Chowchilla,
Uh-huh.
that is crazy and scary. It's not. Chowchilla changed me. Let me just tell you, that prison out there is full of politics, and the women in there, they ride hard with respect and what that means to them, and it was life changing for sure.
What, like, compared to like minimum, maximum prison, what is that like compared to the Las Vegas one you're in?
Oh, the Las Vegas prison is like not even, it's nothing. It's a cakewalk.
Oh,
It's a cakewalk because I remember when, after I had came from Chowchilla, I was involved in, got to be over 11 fights in less than a year in Chowchilla. And not because I was out looking for trouble or anything, just because I didn't, people try to engage in a fight with me. And if you back down and give that I'm a punk, then everybody's going to take advantage of you. So unfortunately, I had been in so many fights, and by the time I had got transferred to Nevada, I was in the prison here, and I remember I got into an argument with one girl, and I immediately turned up, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta give everybody my name and let them know I'm not a punk, and you're not gonna," because I'm new to this prison. And so I turned up and I was ready to fight this girl, and everybody was like, "Oh, whoa, you got to calm down. We don't get down like that over here." That's exactly what they said to me. "You got to calm down, girl." And so I was like, it was actually relieving. And I was like, okay, cool. I could just chill and do my time and go home wherever home was. I wasn't sure at that point, but
do you feel like you are a target because you are a white,
yeah.
redheaded, like pretty girl with
Oh,
a
yes.
name like Brittany? Like, are you
Yeah.
fucking kidding me? Could it be more?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then on top of it, like, I'm not, tooting my own horn or anything, and I'm not like conceited or anything, but I know that I'm pretty.
Yeah.
And when the biggest fight in Chowchilla is over other women's girlfriends. And if you just look the wrong way, or if I'm just like thinking about something and I'm staring off, and it happens to be in the direction of somebody's girlfriend, I'm getting into a fight. It's jealousy is roaring in the prisons. It's outrageous.
And so is that
So
the first time that you did have a relationship with women, is when you got to prison?
no, I had actually started dating women about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months before my first incarceration. And that was like because I had like relapsed on drugs and I was on the streets again. And the relapse on drugs happened because CPS took my children from me, and it fucked me up so bad that I ended up relapsing on drugs. And so I remember I was kind of having this guy was trying to flirt with me, and all I could think about was Jeremy and how disgusted I felt in that moment. And I told myself, I was like, I'm never going to be with a man again. And I had just started dating women. And so when I got to prison, it kind of continued. So
So then, with the girl that we saw, that you had a relationship with, she came
mhm.
from your prison experience in Vegas the last couple years?
Yeah, my second prison time, because I ended up going to prison twice.
Oh.
Yeah, because when I got out the first, he said, "Oh," because when I got out of prison the first time, that's when I ended up meeting Tito and um, giving birth to Giovanni, and my whole relationship with him happened. Um, that ultimately led me back into prison again.
So
And
how
then
can you share that? How did you get in trouble again?
it's kind of the same thing. I'm out doing drugs, hanging around with people that are on drugs and doing crazy things.
And
And
did you always go back to meth, or did you ever get involved with another narcotic?
it's normally always meth. I will say that I didn't just go straight back into meth, and I didn't really want to do it. Um, it's kind of like, I feel like your relationship definitely has an influence on the decisions you make, even though you're still accountable for your own decisions. But it's like, come on, if you're with somebody that you think you're getting ready to marry and you just had a child with, and they're like, come on, let's just get high one time. Let's just party. Let's just get high. We deserve it. Over and over and over and over again. Like, finally, there's going to be that one time, if you don't get away from that person, there's finally going to be that one time where you trick yourself into believing like, I can have a weekend, you know?
Mm.
And as it turns out, I can't have a weekend. No. I ended up back in prison for another 2 years, but I actually don't regret that either, because I was able to get sober again. And that's when I met Marcelino. And now I have this beautiful life. And so I couldn't have had that, if these train of events didn't happen.
So you're in prison. You're obviously
Mhm.
separated from your adorable son. I mean, I love a
Oh.
dark red-headed. I love when someone like your hair is pretty, but I love when someone has that deeper dark red. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's so cute.
And you know
Um,
what?
yeah,
His hair's grown out, and so he has these long curls with that color you're talking about.
yeah.
The sun had caught his eyes the other day, and I said, "Wow, I have never, ever, ever seen that before." His eye color is identical to his hair color. It's amazing. It's amazing.
So, that must have been so hard not to be able to see him. Was your ex Tito like having him visit at all during that time?
Yeah, there's people are a big misconception about what happened when I went to prison the second time with Tito and my son. Tito might have had him for like the 6 months out of the 2 years that I was there, but the rest of the time my parents had him. And that's because Tito was using drugs and had relapsed himself and was in the streets and couldn't take care of him. And finally I called my dad and I begged him to come down here from Alaska and get my son. This my second prison term. I'm not gonna lie, like in the beginning, even though I was relieved to have an opportunity to get sober again, I was very bitter. I was very angry. I, put all of the blame on Tito. I was angry. I was mad. I kept continuing to tell myself if he would have never talked me into using drugs, I would have never ended up back in prison. And the truth is that like I should have said no. Even though I said no 19 times, that 20th time, it's still my fault that I didn't say no that 20th time. I should have, but I didn't have the skills, I guess you would say, I didn't realize that I was being such a follower. That was like my first serious relationship sober and at home on the streets, I don't want to trail off into that, but
Yeah, no, I understand.
the
Yeah.
yeah, I did get to see Giovanni for like the first 6 months. He would come, Tito would bring him on video visits. And I will say I really, really, really appreciated that. And then after that, I was able to call Gio and talk to him on the phone. And lucky enough for me, he was young enough to not really know what was going on. So in his mind, it wasn't like, oh, my mommy's gone, she left me. It was, oh, I get to play in the snow in Alaska with my grandma and grandpa. And
And
so
at
that was,
that time, your parents had left Vegas, went back to Alaska, and gotten.
yes,
It sounds like they got away from the gambling, and
yeah,
and so were they then
and the
like
drinking,
sober and
yeah.
doing well?
Hmm. Yeah, that my parents had left Vegas when I was in prison the first time. They were like, okay, well now Brittany is, first she was Runaway and, on drugs, and my older sister was on drugs, and just like they just had enough, and they went back to Alaska during my first incarceration.
Mm.
Hmm.
So that was good that they were there to help raise him. So then when you so then
Hmm.
now you're there, and how do you meet your husband? How does the correspondence begin?
Okay, so there's a lot of women who are on these pen pal sites, and I knew about them the first time I was in prison, and so the second time it was like I never really had an interest in them because a lot of the girls' motives in there are not really they're not really good for the person that they're writing, unless they have like that kind of understanding, like you're using me for something, I'm using you for something. But like after a while, I don't know, I just started to like really focus on myself in prison, and I started to just block everybody out. I never, unfortunately, like most of the women in prison are not trying to better themselves. And so as I was trying to better myself, I realized I had nothing in common with the people around me. And so because I was never, really talking or hanging out with anyone anymore, I started to become even more lonely than I already was. And so I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to get on these pen pal sites. I'm going to see what's up. I'm going to see who's going to write me, maybe have a friendship, maybe have just mail coming in that'll make me laugh. And so I got on 2 different websites.
Now, how does that work in prison? Like, who takes these photos? Who uploads them? Do you have access to the internet,
Well,
like in the library? How does it work?
You have no access to the internet in prison or jail. You have none. So what happens is you can, if you're able to get the address to these places, like, if I call my mom, my dad, like, hey, can you Google write a prisoner and tell me their address so I can write them and ask them for an application, which is pretty much what I did. But actually, I ended up doing a prison tattoo on a girl to get her to pay for my pen pal membership, because the inmates have to pay for it. Even though it's free to the people at home to use. So I know her boyfriend had got online and he had paid for my memberships. And I had Tito and my mom, a bunch of people had been sending me pictures over the time I had been incarcerated. So I had a stack of pictures. So I just mailed
pictures of yourself.
Yes, pictures of my son. So I had mailed off a bunch of pictures of myself and my application. And next thing you know, I was live. I was on the internet. And people out here in the world were seeing my profile, and I was getting letters from all over the place. And some of them were cool, some of them were crazy, and some of them were creepy.
So when they write you and they're like, I'll put, $50 on your books.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had one guy who was like, he talked about himself in third person. He called himself Belly Button Lee. Mm-hmm. And he had a fetish with belly buttons. And he was like, listen, I don't really want anything from you. I just want to talk about your belly button. And if you don't mind, then I don't mind. And I wrote him back and I was like, okay, but you're going to pay me for that because it's fucking weird, but I'm going to do it. And so he would pay me every week to write him one letter talking about my belly button. And so every week I would have to come up with these like these crazy ideas or things to talk about. Like,
and is that how your writing career began?
I mean, not with Belly Button Lee, but
I mean, it was sort of like a little writing exercise every week.
Yeah,
I mean, along those lines, were you taking advantage of any kind of like college courses or anything that they had at prison? Like
they don't really have every class that they do have available. I definitely took. I got my GED while I was in prison. I took a few different classes like breaking the cycle of dependency. Another rehab program I took was Sisters Together Achieving Recovery and Sobriety. And then I would go to NA, AA. I would go to everything I could to try to better myself. But as far as like college classes, you have to have somebody at home that's willing to pay for that, or else you're just asked out and you don't get an opportunity to, better your future as far as education is concerned.
So they'll have like a class, but unless someone pays for it, you can't just go at 2:00 to the class?
No, they don't have a class. They have a classroom to get your GED. So if you want to work in your GED credits, then you can go to a classroom there. But as far as college, you have to have somebody to pay for a mail-in college course. So
I did not think it was that difficult. I feel like it should not be as difficult. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have a couple of people, you have the belly button guy, and then your dude comes through, right?
Yeah, he came through, I would say about 6 months after I had posted online. And it was funny because he actually, I didn't get his letter until 3, maybe 4 weeks after he had wrote it. And the officer had brought me like a stack of mail and was like, I guess this was lost in the mailroom. And honestly, I think it was one of the COs fucking with me. But I mean, because how does a stack of mail get lost in a mailroom when you pass out mail every single day? So I ended up getting a stack of mail and I'm reading it. And I'm like, okay, this guy's weird. Okay, this one's funny. I definitely got to write him back. And then I find Marcelino's letter and I'm like, wow, this letter is pretty impressive. This guy he sounds very attractive. He's funny, intelligent. So I ended up writing him back and it turns out like the whole time he had thought like I just wasn't interested. And so when he got my letter, well, in his first letter, he said, if you didn't, pay too close attention to the return address, I'm pointing it out now. I live down the street. So it ain't nothing for me to come up there and visit you, is what he said. So I was like, wow, no way. So I wrote him and I was like, well, if you want to come say hi, like, I'm not going to turn you down. And he ended up showing up on a visit literally a week later after I wrote him. And I was so nervous. I had to put on all my little fake makeup and stuff.
Tell me a little bit, how do you do the prison makeup?
Well, they do sell some makeup like mascara. In county jail, I think that's it. They sell like chapstick and mascara and that's it. But if you get like a regular like lead pencil and you kind of like scratch it against something, and then you could use it for your eyebrows, you can use it for eyeliner. I know like in some places that don't sell mascara, girls will like literally take instant coffee and conditioner and they'll mix it and they'll put it on their eyelashes. And I tried it one time. It's just not for me. Yeah. So
you met him, and when you met him, could you meet at without glass in between you?
No, it was kind of like what we're doing right now. It was like a video visit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they had like a long row of like the video screens. And I know that my cell was on the other side of the unit. And so I could see the screens. And when my visit screen had popped up, I didn't see a person there. And so when I was walking up, I was like, dang, did he stand me up? And I'm thinking like all this stuff. And I'm like, he's whack. And then I walked up and it turned out he was sitting there, but he was like ducking off into the corner like this. And I was like, what are you doing over there? And he goes, well, he's like, I just wasn't sure if like you were catfishing me or something. And he goes, your pictures were really pretty. I just didn't understand how somebody, that looks like you could be in prison for the things you're being accused of. And so if you weren't, if your picture didn't match, I was just going to take off. So.
So,
well, dang, how shallow.
wait, when you talked about the CO officers or correctional officers,
yeah,
are they all awful? Do you ever make friends with one of them? Is there ever one that's like kind of nice?
Yeah. There's a few that are super cool, and then it's like 75% like just suck, and then the other 25% are like so cool, like it's like you can't even believe they're officers. Like more of them need to be there.
Yeah. And are they men and women, or are they all women?
In the jail in the county, there's only female officers that are allowed to be around female inmates. But in the prison, it's male and female.
And do people ever start having affairs with the male officers?
Oh yeah. I mean, I know one officer got fired just when I was over there in the Vegas prison because he was having intercourse with a woman that was actually a lifer there. And so she ended up doing some, segregation time, and he ended up getting fired. So it was kind of like a big deal.
Oh, that's pretty juicy scoop there.
Yeah.
So how did the show come about then? So you guys start seeing each other, and when you start seeing him, do you have a release date at that time to look forward to?
No, I don't. And I had kept going into the courtroom fighting for different bail motions, and the judge just wasn't really giving me any kind of action on a bail motion. And they kept continuing my case, and it was just a long, drawn out process. But he, Marcelino just stayed with me by my side throughout the whole entire thing, like always accepted my phone calls. He wrote me every week. He came down to the jail to see me every week, and every court date he was there in court. So, and what's funny is that they have a side in the courtroom. They have a side that's for the family and the visitors, and then they have a side for just the attorneys. And he, once the person you're there to see, their case is called, then they make you leave the courtroom because you have no further business being there. So Marcelino would come dressed up in a suit and a tie, and they'd never question him. He would act like he was an attorney, and he would just sit on the side with the attorneys so he could just be in the courtroom with me all day long. Because once you came in with a group of inmates, they don't take you out of the courtroom until every single inmate's case has been called by the judge. So you're in there for hours. So he would just use that opportunity to sit there and, I don't know, I guess check me out or something. I
So
don't know.
when that was going on, was word spreading in the prison that you had this hot guy in a suit that was visiting you, and did that cause you more problems with jealous people?
Well, actually, like the girls were kind of giving me a hard time about it. And they're like, you're really like feeling this guy like off of a letter? Like, and I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, is he sending you money? Is he doing this? Is he doing that? And I'm like, well, first of all, when we first started talking, I asked him, like, please do not send me anything. Like, I don't want, like, I really like you and I want to see if this can go anywhere. And I don't ever want our relationship to be misconstrued as, just I'm using you, you're using me kind of thing, which is what most women do in there.
Right.
Um, so they were giving me a hard time. They were like, "You're fucking blushing on the phone. You're just da 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 da," and they're like, "I can't believe you're really feeling some guy off the internet." They were actually they're kind of bitches about it, really.
And what about your cellmate that was like your girlfriend at the time? Was she supportive of it?
Sasha, she had barely actually got bailed out after being in jail for like 4 or 5 years. So, because we were roommates in the county jail. And so when I had first met her, she had been in there for years. When she got arrested, there was like no bail for her. And when I started asking her about it, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't have any bail, and I don't really want to make the judge mad, so I haven't asked for one." And I was like, "That's the craziest shit I ever heard." I said, "You don't ever stop fighting for your life or your freedom. Don't ever do that. Don't just like lay down and submit when people are trying to take your life from you and lock you up forever." And so she ended up taking my advice and having her attorneys put her on for a bail motion, and the judge ended up giving it to her. And so she ended up bailing out and then was continuing to fight her case from the streets. And then you guys ultimately saw her sentencing on the show, which didn't go so well, but
Right. And
mhm.
how did the show come about? Who heard about it first, you or him?
Well, I had actually, okay, so after a year of us dating, I finally got sentenced, and I was sentenced to 2 years in prison. But because I had already been in the county jail for a year and a half, I only had 6 months left to do in prison. So I ended up going to prison, been there 3, 4 months. I'm getting ready to parole. And I called Marcelino one night, and he was like, "You're never going to believe what I just saw on TV." And I was like, "What?" And so he tells me about the show, and he was like, "Man, our story is so much better. Like, I just feel like our love and our connection is like worth telling and talking about." And I was like, "Okay, so now what?" And he's like, "Well, because they have that ad if you or someone
Were you guys on first season or second?
the second season of Lockup.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, go on.
The first season when I was in prison, and I was like, "That's crazy." And he was like, "Well, they have an option if you want to email and let it." And I was like, "Well, just do it. Fuck it, do it." And so he did, and I ended up having a couple of phone interviews from prison with the casting and producer and things like that. And I guess they just really liked what I had to say because they were there the day I got out of prison. They were there. I did not get 1 second to just take a breath of free air.
And, I mean, I think I think your story was like the most interesting to watch and the most compelling, and you guys seemed really connected. And it's great to see that you're going strong and you're still together. Because when I was looking at your Instagram, I was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, he hasn't been in a photo since March. So I'm glad to hear that he's out there with the kids and the
Because he's
dog.
been on quarantine, he fucking forgot what a razor is. So I haven't been taking too many selfies.
Yeah. Um, and now we see in the show that he was like pursuing professional poker. How did you feel
Mhm.
about that, being that that was such a difficult road for your dad?
Um, honestly, it made me uncomfortable. It still makes me a little bit uncomfortable because like no matter how good of a player you are, it's still gambling. You're still taking a chance, you
Hmm.
know. But he is a really good player, and he does win more than he loses. And so it's kind of like for a while I was stuck on the fence of like, do I support him or do I take my father's actions and put it on my husband, which isn't fair. And it was like I was just kind of stuck in a crossroads.
And so far
Yeah.
it's working out. And then
Yeah.
you have the two other kids with him. What are their names again?
Zoila and the other one is a secret.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right.
You guys are gonna have to tune in the future for
Oh, good.
that.
Okay, well, that also makes me feel better. Makes me feel
Yeah.
better that we're gonna see more of you on TV. And
Hmm.
also, I was like, okay, I'm not seeing the husband and I'm not seeing the baby. So, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
because
good.
even though the coronavirus is going on and things are locked down and shut down temporarily, that doesn't mean my NDA went anywhere. So I'm still
Okay,
have
good.
to follow my
Let's let's
non-disclosure agreement.
let's follow it. Let's not. So, is everything still good with your mom then?
Um, yeah, I mean, from the last season, you guys saw that she moved down here, and I will admit that she is having a little bit of struggle right now, but I'm hopeful for the future that it's going to get better.
And do you keep in any contact with other cast members from the franchise? Okay. Um, now, oh, someone said, was a storyline with the girlfriend fake? She seems to be so stable now with her husband. But you just basically answered that no, that was real. Do you keep in
Yeah,
touch with her?
I do. I actually just talked to her yesterday, and she's like, "Well, after quarantine, we got to go out, have a
So
drink,
wait,
and
I thought she got like 10 years in prison.
wait. Are you talking about Sasha or Amanda?
Wait, did you have two girlfriends?
No, no, no. Amanda was my girlfriend. I never dated Sasha, who went back to
Oh,
prison.
oh, you mean just, oh. Wait, you had one girlfriend in prison,
Well, I had quite a few, but
but
Amanda,
Amanda
Amanda,
was
we was
was your
dating.
and we saw her. And then
Hmm.
you guys who was okay, so was it Amanda who then sat in the back of the truck and you screamed at the prison?
Yeah, yeah, that was Amanda.
Got it. Okay. So you're
Hmm.
just still friends, but you're platonic friends.
Yeah.
Or so
Hmm.
we or so whatever. Okay. What um this person wrote, what does she think? Is she friends with other girls from LALU? That sounds like a university, but I assume that's the name of the prison.
No, love after lockup.
Oh,
I
love
think.
after lockup, that's what it means. Oh, how did I not even get that? So
I
you're
mean,
not. You said you're not really friends with anybody, any of the girls.
I'm cordial with everyone, but I don't really talk to anyone. So,
Yeah. Um, okay. Someone said, I just want to compliment her. I'm so proud of how self-aware she is with her feelings and the strong communication
uh,
skills she has with her family and her husband. I agree. Um, okay, let me see. Let me see what this also says. Um, okay, a lot of these you answered. I'm just going through it. Hold on. Um, oh, so now where are you with co-parenting with Tito?
not at all. I
Oh,
have I have 100% custody of Giovanni, and it's not that I, wanted to take Gio from him, but he was using drugs and is still using drugs. And when we went to court, we both had to take drug tests, and he popped positive, and the amount of meth in his system was off the charts. And he was using meth during the time that he had Gio in the house with him. And yeah, so there was a lot of people on social media that they don't have the whole story, and so they're talking mess, and how could you take that man's son from him when he took care of him while you were in prison? And I'm like, wait a minute, how would you feel if your child was being neglected while the father was in the garage for hours smoking dope, and your son isn't being like his hygiene isn't being taken care of, he's not being properly fed, he was attacked by one of their pets in the house and had barely even like found out. I had to take my son to the emergency room, and it's all because they're in the garage smoking dope. So it's like, I'm not trying to take my son from him, but I don't, Tito's been to prison. I've been to prison. I'm an ex-addict. Tito is still using, like, I don't want my son to grow up and end up an addict or end up in prison. And so if I have to be the bitch that takes my son from his dad because his actions are not in alignment with good parenting, then I'm going to do that. And I'm going to be that bitch every day. And I don't care. you know?
I like that bitch. But I think for someone who watched, why it was a little surprising for the
Yeah,
audience is because we saw this what looks to be like a cute couple, him and his girlfriend. Their
yeah.
house looked very nice, like,
Mhm.
upper middle class, newer construction.
Well
Yeah.
that's her house,
Mm.
and he's just staying with her. And that's, his girlfriend who pays for everything. And I mean, she was, when he first met her, a registered nurse, doing well, owned her home. He got her using dope, just like he had me using dope. And now she's sold everything in her house. Her house is fucking filthy. She's lost her job. It's bad. Both of them would come to court, and you could just tell that they had so much meth in their system. It's sad. It's sad.
It's so incredibly sad because there's this
Yeah.
movie that I talked about that really made a huge impact, like just on me
Mhm.
and the problem that meth causes. And I forgot the name of it. But it's based on a true story, and Steve Carell played the father. It's absolutely excellent. I'll
Mhm.
like send it to you to watch. But
Okay.
and it's based on a true story, based on a book. And
Yeah.
they were a wealthy family living in San Francisco, divorced, and all of a sudden the kid was going off to college. Beautiful Boy is the name of the movie.
Yeah.
Beautiful Boy, it was like,
Oh boy.
yes, it was amazing. And there was just this scene in the movie where he hooks up with this girl. It's just like a cute college girl, whatever.
Mhm.
And because he'd had a history with that drug, he relapses on the drug, and
Wow.
she's into him and she likes him. So she's
Yeah.
like, okay. And then, like, within 2 weeks, at least they portrayed this in the movie, within 2 weeks, they're breaking into the dad's house.
Yeah.
She looks horrible. She's like, and I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it like in my neighborhood where I see this like cute, you could tell they're cute. The girl still has good highlights. And like she's a month ago, she might have been going to class. And it's just like, and in the movie, they really share that like meth is like the worst that there is, like the
Yeah.
worst, most destructive, quickest, most
Yeah.
addictive. So, I mean, thank God for you being that strong person, but and also I think it's sweet too that you recognize what a tragic story that is.
Yeah.
And but what can you do? I mean, the only thing you could do is protect your son
Yeah.
and hope and pray that they get their shit together.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, you just can't that's not your issue.
Right. Yeah,
So
and it doesn't no part of it makes me feel good that he's, self-destructing and using drugs still. Like, I'm not like, oh well, haha, that's what you deserve. Like, after everything you and I've been through. No, it makes me sad. Like, you're the father of my child, and I don't know. No part of it makes me feel
no,
good
of
at all.
course not. Of course not.
Mm-mm.
Um, let's see. Oh, is there anything that you won't film or that you didn't want to film?
Um, Not that I can think of, because I don't really I don't know. I just remain transparent. It doesn't, I try to stay like, as real as possible no matter where I'm at. And if this is like what's going on in my life, then it's what's going on. Marcelino and I are very, very, very much in love and have a wonderful relationship, but that doesn't mean that it's perfect. I
Mhm.
mean, he's on my nerves sometimes. I get on his nerves. I don't agree with everything that he says. He doesn't agree with everything I say. Um, so I think like I don't really think that there's anything that I haven't wanted to film.
And what's his story with his family? Are they around? Were they supportive of you in the beginning?
It's not that they weren't supportive, just maybe a little bit skeptical, I guess I would say.
Mhm.
His mom has always been very nice to me, especially like when I first met her. She was actually really excited to meet me because she had never met one of Marcelino's girlfriends before. So, it would have been 20 years up until the day I had met her that she had met one of his girlfriends. And he had told his mom 20 years ago, he goes, or 22 years now, he says, the next time you meet a woman in my life, it's going to be the one. And up until then, I'm not going to have you meet any of my girlfriends because it's not, It's if until she's the one, then you'll meet her mom. And he stuck to that. And 20 years later, I finally meet his mom, and she's just absolutely in love with me and so happy.
Is she
Yeah,
does she live close by that she can, like, help with the kids and stuff?
yeah,
Oh, that's
uh,
nice. That's really
mhm,
nice. Yeah, because
yeah,
he says that, he goes, "I was just this lone wolf, and now I have this family of 5," you know? And that is
yeah,
a huge adjustment, when you think about it.
huge,
Yeah,
huge,
but I
huge. And
mean
for me too, just because I've spent 7 years out of I'm only 28. So I spent 7 years in prison in a cell where all I got to do is worry about my cellmate. That's it. And so it's a lot for me to adjust to as well.
well, I'm so glad you talked to me. I'm very excited about, your journey going forward.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where they can get the book.
Okay, so my book is called One Woman's Journey, Surviving the Streets, and it's available on ebook and paperback on Amazon. And if you guys go to my Instagram at Brittany.loveafterlockup, the link to get the book, if you can't find it on Amazon, is in my bio.
Well, that is awesome, and I look forward to, seeing more of you on the show when the show comes back and
Yes,
the world gets back going.
thank you.
All right, take
Yeah.
care. Thank you.